and welcome back. For today's practice, you can use whatever props that you'd like to. I would recommend having a bolster or a big pillow. And we'll start in just a comfortable seat, so you may wish to elevate your hips by sitting onto your bolster, or sit flat onto the floor, or in any position that feels good for you. And find length in your back body and take a moment to close your eyes. Settle into the present moment and observe how you feel. So often when we feel stressed, we all have very different edges of what makes us stressed. So take a moment right now to think about what your edge is. What pushes you over the edge? What stresses you out the most? And it could be so many different things. It could be family, work, finances. There's so many different answers to this. But just recognize for yourself what your own edge is. And once you can identify your edge, you can start to play with it. Maybe soften its edges, soften the borders, blur the spaces between what makes you stressed and what doesn't. So today's practice is all about playing your edge. And we'll work with a few different stretches to find some new edges within them. So find your first edge in your breath. What pace of breath allows you to feel relaxed? Where is the edge between your breath when you're stressed and your breath when you're calm? Once you've established this first edge, perhaps even deepen it a little bit further. And then really strive to keep your breath as consistent as possible throughout your practice today. Once you feel really connected to this, slowly open your eyes and draw the soles of your feet to touch and open your knees wide apart from each other. So you can choose whatever distance feels appropriate for you to have your feet away from your pelvis or toward it. Find your first edge and what feels good for you. You may wish to place props underneath your knees. So if you have your blocks nearby, you can slide them underneath your knees to give you some extra support there. And you may wish to place your bolster either over your lap or forward in front of you at an angle and rest your head onto that bolster. You can also have it around your lap and round your back forward and down. You can stack your fists. Just find a place where you can comfortably surrender forward. And you're welcome to stay up tall if that feels more appropriate for your first edge, or you can start to fold a little bit further forward. So find a place first that's not your deepest position, but allow this to be your first edge. A place where you might feel a little bit of sensation, but not something so intense that you wouldn't be able to sustain it. And in this first edge, notice your sensations. Notice how your mind reacts to these sensations. Notice where you might feel comfort and where you might feel discomfort. Notice where you might feel relaxed and where you might feel stressed. And finally, notice if these things are manifesting in your body or if they're manifesting in your mind, or perhaps even if they're manifesting in your breath. Now you might wish to stay exactly as you are at this first edge, or if it feels appropriate to you, you may wish to deepen into another edge, perhaps starting to blur those lines because you've created some more space to be able to fold perhaps a little bit further. Maybe changing the shape of your bolster or its angle, perhaps rounding your back a little bit further to surrender the weight of your torso forward and down. And if you take a new edge, check in with it. First, of course, recognize if it's gone a bit too far and if you need to take a step back. Or maybe recognize that you feel like you'd like a little bit more sensation, in which case you might find another edge. Perhaps release the props from underneath your knees if you have them there. Perhaps slide your heels a little bit closer towards your pelvis. Play around with your edge to allow yourself to surrender maybe a little bit further. Notice how your edge can change in your own body. Allow this to translate to how your edge can also change within your mind. Wherever your edge may be right now, allow yourself to surrender to it. And you may notice that the more you surrender, the more your edge moves. And this applies both physically and mentally. Take 5 more breaths here, softening your edges as much as you can. On your next breath, if you fold it, slowly draw yourself back up. Move your props over toward the side. And draw your knees in toward each other. Just pause for a moment, elongate your spine, maybe close your eyes, and simply observe. Maybe you found a new edge within your body that allowed you to find a new edge within your mind. And when you're ready, slowly open your eyes and walk your feet out as wide as your mat and the long edge of your mat. So you may need to turn to face the long edge if you're not facing it already. And you may wish to elevate your hips here by sitting up onto a block or a bolster. You may also wish to slide blocks underneath your knees, or you can also use rolled up blankets or pillows. And then maybe take your bolster or a pillow in front of you and place it on an angle so that you can rest your forehead onto it. Maybe this is your first edge. Soften and relax into a place here that feels appropriate for your body, where you can relax into the shape, but you're not feeling the most intense sensation. So take a step back from your deepest stretch and just notice your first edge. How does it feel physically in your body? Now, as you soften into this edge, how does it affect the edges in your mind? You might find that there's a bit of softness there as well. And you might find that both physically and mentally, you're ready to move to a new edge, perhaps changing the angle of your bolster or sliding it forward ever so slightly, or maybe releasing it long ways over you so you can surrender back forward and down. Again, maybe stacking your fists to rest your forehead onto them. And then, of course, if you change your edge, recognize if it's an appropriate place for you to stay. Maybe take a step back, or maybe perhaps fold a little bit further if that feels appropriate. And in your second edge, notice how you feel both physically and mentally. Notice how your edge is constantly changing. The more time that you allow your body to sit with a shape, the more it can soften into deeper expressions. This same philosophy can apply to dealing with stress in your mind. the more you can sit with these feelings, the less powerful they become. The more you're able to soften your edges around them, to soften the edge of what makes you stress. So again, maybe choose to stay as you are, or if you feel this edge softening and blurring into a new one, then maybe readjust your props as you wish. Maybe slide your props out from underneath your knees or underneath your pelvis if that feels appropriate. Maybe surrender slightly further into your release. Again, find a new edge if that feels appropriate for you, and allow yourself to soften into this new place. Take 5 more conscious breaths. On your next inhale, slowly begin to peel your chest back up. Rise back up to a seat. Move your props over to the side. Catch a hold behind your knees and bend into them to draw them back towards center. Elongate your spine. Maybe close your eyes for a moment and observe. And then when you're ready, open your eyes. You can turn to face the short edge of your mat now. And perhaps elevate your hips by sitting up onto a block if you'd like. Perhaps place a block underneath your knees to give them a soft bend if you'd like. And then maybe take your bolster or pillow lengthwise over your legs. And from here, allow the weight of your chest to melt over your bolster. And you can place it on an angle and rest your head onto that angle, onto the bolster. You can release it flat onto your legs and surrender the weight of your belly over the bolster. You can make fists with your hands to rest on top of. You can play around with this however you'd like to find an appropriate edge for you to start in. In this first edge, let your body soften. Notice that right now it might feel like a very hard, definite edge, but allow yourself some time to marinate in this place and see if your edge changes. Maybe after some time you find that you're able to perhaps surrender a little bit further. Maybe you want to readjust your props, perhaps releasing a block from underneath your knees or even under your pelvis. Play around with what feels appropriate for you. There is no right or wrong. Play with your own personal edges. What feels good, what feels like you can surrender into it. And you can allow your spine to round here. Allow your legs to completely relax. And let gravity do the work for you. And your change of edge might not be something drastic or huge. It might just feel like a subtle release in your own body. Maybe you notice that you were holding tension in your shoulders and you were able to just gently relax that. Maybe you were holding tension in your face and you could suddenly unfurl your brow. It doesn't have to be a big movement like releasing a prop or folding deeper. Find your personal edge and then blur the lines that create it. Maybe you soften further into a mental edge. Maybe you hold a pose for a little bit longer than you thought you could. Maybe you breathe a little bit deeper than you thought was possible. We have so many edges everywhere. There's no way that it should look or shouldn't. There's no right or wrong. Experiment with your own edges. Wherever you are, take 5 full conscious breaths. Maybe allow each exhale to soften another edge. On your next inhale, slowly lift the weight of your torso and move your props over toward the side. Cross your ankles and roll forward onto your belly. Reach your right arm out in line with your shoulder, with your palm facing down to the floor, and then take your left hand underneath your left shoulder. And very gently press into your left hand to roll onto your right shoulder, and then release your head to a bolster, a pillow, a block, or the floor. And pause for a moment here. Maybe this is your edge. Observe sensation. You're more than welcome to stay just as you are, just like this. Or if perhaps you'd like to explore a further edge, maybe bend into your left knee and place the sole of your foot behind your right knee. And then observe this edge. Maybe you choose to stay here, or if you'd like to, reach your left arm to the sky and then bend your elbow deeply and release your fingertips behind your heart. And observe sensations here. Whichever edge you're working with, soften it. Allow yourself to surrender into that space and blur the lines that make it an edge, whether physically or mentally. Allow yourself to surrender here. Draw a full breath in. And if your left arm is behind you, exhale to release it back toward the left side of your mat. If you bend your left knee, stretch and straighten it out long. And then very slowly roll back onto your belly. Bend your right elbow and place your hand underneath your right shoulder. And then stretch your left arm out in line with your left shoulder. Gently press into your right hand and roll onto your left shoulder and release your head to either a prop or the floor. Pause here and observe this first edge. Observe sensations that arise. And either choose to stay here as you are, or if you feel that you're ready for another edge, Then bend your right knee and place the sole of your foot behind your left knee. Pause here and observe how it feels. Either choose to stay as you are, or if you'd like another edge, then stretch your right arm to the sky, and then bend your elbow deeply and slowly release it behind your heart. Observe this new edge. Wherever you are, soften the edge. Blur the lines that create it, and surrender yourself a little bit further, either physically or mentally. Take a full breath in. If your right arm is behind you, slowly release it back toward the right side of your mat. If you bend your right knee, stretch and straighten your leg out long again. And very mindfully roll back over onto your belly. And bend your left elbow. And make a small pillow with your hands to rest your forehead or a cheek on top of. Soften the full weight of your body toward the mat. Relax your breath and soften your mind. Remind yourself of that place that you established an edge in the beginning of your practice. That place that pushes you over the edge into stress. And now remind yourself how malleable your edge was throughout your whole practice. How changeable your edge can be. And remind yourself that you always have the option, when you feel stressed, to soften that edge. So this is where I will leave you today in this front lying Shavasana. So feel free to stay for as long as you would like. Hopefully you found a way to soften your edges, especially when it comes to dealing with stress. Thank you for sharing your practice, and I'll see you next time. Namaste.